fantastic, flowed really well, really happy with everything that came, and raised over £2,000 for charity, which was incredible. What about you, Nathan? How did you feel it went from your side?
Yeah, no, it was great to, as you say, put sort of names to faces and see people. It almost felt like coming out of those first sort of original COVID lockdowns, where you've been speaking to everyone at work and you've been sort of conversing with everyone sort of over social media and on computer laptops, etc. And then for such a long time to actually see people in the flesh and sort of have a chat, it was great. And as you say, it's good to see how open and connected that community really is. And I think, as you say, we scratched on the surface with 50, 60, 70 people in attendance. I think I like to be optimistic, and I think the only way is up, really. But it was a great day out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing as well is I've only just realised that all of the 5 Yard Dynasty writers were there. I'm pretty sure we said it before the event, but all the 5 Yard Dynasty writers were there, apart from Emerson, who is based in the US. We're trying to get him over to the UK.
Poor effort on his part, really, let's be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
Emerson, if you're listening, UKFFC 23 is going to include you. But that's enough UKFFC talk. We've been 5 minutes of introducing and just chit-chat. So today, what we're going to be doing is looking at the 2020 draft class and the 2021 draft class. So that is the Joe Burrow to Justin Herbert class and the Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson draft classes. And we're going to draft them together. And the way that we're going to do this is Nathan's going to have the first pick. I'm going to have the second. Rich is going to have the third. And we're going to go in a snake format. So Rich will get a double on the turn. And we're going to have to fill a roster. So it's not just kind of like a rookie draft where you just draft for the best player available. We are filling the roster of 1 quarterback position, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, a flex spot, and a super flex spot. So it may be a little bit different than what you would expect from rookie drafts. But Rich, this is your baby. This is your idea. I'm excited to see how this goes because I have a feeling that we might see 1 or 2 shocks and surprises during this.
Yeah, I'm a little bit intrigued. I've been thinking all day, I'll be honest. I'm thinking, do I just go best player available, or do I try and outthink the two of you and try and come up with the best team? So maybe what we could do is we could put the 3 teams out on Twitter and let Twitter decide who's got the best team afterwards. So yeah, should we let you? I thought, as you're the guest, Nathan, you can have the first pick. So if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, look, thanks, Rich. If I'm brutally honest, I think the first pick is actually probably the worst here because it's such I think a very healthy years and there's such good quality there. I have toyed and toed and froed and sort of decided what position I want to go here because there's some real elite players at the top of each position. But I think I'm going to throw the first slight. It's not necessarily a spanner, but I'm going to go with Kyle Pitts as the one.
No!
I'm glad we're all in agreement. Because I was going to take Kyle Pitts.
I just looked at the positions and to me the shallowest was tight end. Look, I'm obviously giving you. I don't want to give away too much of it. I'm giving you both a bit of freedom now to wait on tight end and go other positions. But the reality was I just felt I had to get Pitts because, look, don't get me wrong. There's some other really good tight ends there, but they're still, to me, developmental players as opposed to Pitts, who I believe is a pretty close to not finished article. There's still a lot of room there, but he's still producing at that high level already.
Yeah, I was going Pitts. I was hoping that he'd make it to me. I thought if I can grab Pitts, then I'm sort of tight. Have you got any concerns about? Are we overhyping Pitts too much, Nathan? Do you think? Yes, he had a fantastic rookie season. He's the highest drafted tight end prospect ever. Do you think we're almost crowning him before he's achieved that real fantasy stardom?
Look, it's difficult to say. I think. Look, I think in terms of the quarterback transition, I think that's probably the biggest question mark I feel around Pitts right now. You're going from Matty Ryan, who's an absolute experienced veteran for a long career. Now you're going to sort of a hybrid situation where it seems like Mariota's the starter who hasn't actually started a full season the last couple of seasons, or you've got a rookie with Desmond Ridder. I think also sort of the slight turmoil with Calvin Ridley's suspension. There are not many competitors for targets, in my opinion. And if you do look at what Kyle Pitts' rookie year, what over 1,000 receiving yards, and I think it was only one sort of receiving touchdown. I stand to be corrected, but to me, there's a lot more upside on the touchdown side of things. And even if he has, let's say, 200 yards less receiving, which depending on the quarterback throwing to him, I think there's the upside on the tight end, on the touchdown side. So I do think they're question marks, but look, we're talking about a sophomore, second-year player. I think he's on that team. He's their number one receiver, and that's just sort of what made me rest at ease slightly going with them at 101.
I'm sure it's a little bit of I suppose a bit in saying that me and Rich were there for the first touchdown. I don't know whether you were there for the London
Just like
game.
rubbing this in, don't you, Liam? Because it was against the Jets.
Yeah, exactly. So
no, I was. I missed the Pitts one, but I was there for Trevor Lawrence's first win at the Spurs Stadium for the Jacksonville Jags.
So moving on to my pick, the second pick in the draft, I'm going to go Justin Herbert. So I wanted Kyle Pitts at this pick. I wasn't kind of expecting the snipe with the first pick. Rich is probably kicking himself now for giving the guest the first pick. But yeah, I'm going to go Justin Herbert. So for me, I'm going to give away a bit of my strategy for the rest of this draft. But there's two clear quarterbacks above the rest, in my opinion, and that is Burrow and Herbert. Now, I wanted to grab one of them here, and if Rich wants to go running back, is fine by me, or double other positions. But I have a feeling that if I left both of them on the board, Rich would be sitting pretty with Herbert and Burrow. Can't let that happen. So Justin Herbert for me. It's more on Justin Herbert specifically, so that receiving room hasn't really changed. Jared Cook has left at the tight end position, and I've got Gerald Everett, which to me doesn't really change much for him. I don't think there's going to be much of a change in terms of Justin Herbert's play because of that move. You've got Mike Williams just signed a big contract. I believe it was 2 to 3 years, Rich. I know it's 3 years in general, but I think he can be cut after 2 for a good saving. Then Keenan Allen's still there. Eckler's still there for another good year. So to me, Herbert, at the moment, I wouldn't be drafting him where he's going. I saw him going 101 in redraft charity leagues over the past week or so. But in this situation, I like Herbert over Burrow very slightly. So Herbert's my pick.
What do you think of that, Nathan?
Yeah, I was tossing up the whole day whether to sort of go Herbert or whether to go Pitts, and this was the one sort of real doubt I had was with going with Titan at the 101 was I know both Herbert and Burrow aren't going to be there for me at the the 203. So look, I've had to take the gamble, and I'll see if it pays off for me down the line. But no, I think Herbert was definitely the number 2 player. Although to me there's not too much between him and Burrow.
Nice.
I'm very similar. I've got Herbert currently in Dynasty. I've got him as my my quarterback 4, and then Burrow at my quarterback 6, and I don't see there's much of a difference there. Rich, where do you fall on Herbert? Because at the moment, people are anointing him as the next truly elite quarterback. I personally am a bit more skeptical on it, but where do you sit on Herbert?
I mean, I think the guy's incredible. I think the velocity and the arm speed that he has, and the ability to whip the ball the way he does it at the height he is quite frankly obscene. I've seen a lot of people that he's jumped up into that top tier of quarterbacks. For me, he's still in that second tier with Lamar and Kyler. I'd still have Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes ahead of him. I'm very excited about what he's going to be. I think he really could be incredible, but I just think that I almost want to see it just a little bit more before I anoint him in that top tier along with Allen and Mahomes.
Who are you going here for your first round pick and second round pick on the turn?
So first of all, I'm just going to take Joe Burrow. I think there's two like uber elite quarterbacks in these two draft classes. As you've talked about, I wanted to grab one of them. I think if I didn't grab Joe Burrow here and you were able to start Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, I'd quite frankly never forgive myself. I think as a dynasty community, perhaps we've overhyped Joe Burrow a little bit. I think talk of him being in that top 5 is a little bit rich for me, if I'm being honest. I think he's my QB6. I still very much see him in that Dak tier rather than that Lamar, Kyler, Justin Herbert tier. Are you with me, Nathan? You're sort of nodding your head there. Do you think he's not quite super elite yet?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think, look, Mahomes is Mahomes, and if he's not winning a Super Bowl, he's not having a good year, and that's what people are sort of that's what they're judging him on. They're judging him with those elite standards, and you look at Peter Burrow for getting a team to the Super Bowl. Josh Allen still is yet to do that, although he's producing at those levels. I think Herbert needs to get a team to the playoff. If we are looking at fantasy reasons, yes, there's every reason there to say he's on his way to being in that top tier. But I agree. I think he's just maybe another good season away from being classified as in the top 3. That's my sort of feel as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then my second pick. So I did think about the way I'd have it ranked. I've got Justin Jefferson ahead of this guy, but I wanted to try and grab the stack. So I'm going to go with Jamar Chase at the 201.
Tom would be pleased.
Yeah, to stack him with Joe Burrow. It's a toss-up between Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. I have them back-to-back in my rankings. They are exactly equal in terms of my trade values. So I'm delighted with either of them. But yeah, I'm just going to lean Jamar Chase just to get that stack. I think he's one of the best prospects we've seen coming out of college. Yes, we only had one year of good tape, but he showed that a year off and that 1 year of tape didn't mean anything. He's an absolute freak. I do think we're going to see a slight regression to the mean in terms of he had an obscene amount of long touchdowns, and I think we're probably going to see that. But I wouldn't be shocked if we saw some target volume tick up slightly.
So, Nathan, how do you feel about Chase? Because at the moment, I have Jefferson above Chase as well. Although I can understand the stacking element to this and trying to cozy up to Tom Strachan a little bit. But how do you feel about this move?
I think I tend to sort of. I see stacking as very relevant in sort of best ball leagues and those leagues where you are looking for boom bust type of offenses. I think. I'm assuming, and you must correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm trying to sort of look when I look at Dynasty, I do also want to diversify as well to a certain extent. And look, if player for player and like for like, I can't really separate Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. I think they're both elite. Had I personally gone Joe Burrow, I probably would have wanted to diversify just as sort of a saving grace. But again, this is just individual preferences as opposed to what is right and what is wrong. But to compare the two players, look, he had an unbelievable rookie year. You can't deny that. So did Jefferson to a certain extent. I think Jefferson... It's going to come down to if Burrow keeps improving and if there's any regression really in Kirk Cousins and how that sort of new offense with the new coach there in Minnesota is going to be. But look, I'm very high on both, and for dynasty reasons, they're pretty up there in the top 3 wide receivers, if not the top 2 dynasty wide receivers.
So I'm going to stop the Justin Jefferson talk here because that's going to have to wait an extra pick. I am going to take Jonathan Taylor. So I was quite surprised that Rich left Jonathan Taylor on the board, but when we're thinking about Dynasty, I know that Rich likes his wide receivers early and grabs his running backs later on. Maybe gets that one of those running backs early, but I know that he prefers to grab a lot of them later. So I'll take the Jonathan Taylor pick here. The first running back off the board in basically every startup there is going at the moment. If there is someone that has taken a running back over Jonathan Taylor, I'd like to see that draft. But he is unquestionably the dynasty wide receiver quarterback. Why am I getting these positions mixed up, guys? This is the second week in a row I've done this. Running back one. So,
yeah, blame the Heat. Blame the Heat.
Yeah, blame the Heat. Don't listen to last week's show where I did the same thing. So, yeah, he's the unquestioned running back one, in my opinion, a tier of his own. I do think that there is another running back in this class, or maybe even two, that could be creeping up into that tier next year if they have another really good season. But yeah, to me, Jonathan Taylor is the unquestioned running back one, and it really was a toss-up between Taylor and Jefferson for me here. Nathan, how do you feel about Jonathan Taylor here over Justin Jefferson, as we've just spoken about?
Look, for me, it was sort of I was pretty happy with either scenario. Really, you've basically made the decision for me because I'll definitely be taking Justin Jefferson next. I was, if I'm honest, I was expecting you to go Jefferson, just sort of possibly sort of the PPR scoring might have been something that you factored in. Look, JT is off the back of last year, he's expected to be the RB1. So it's really, there's no real room for mistakes here for him. I think the volume will still be there. I think with Matt Ryan as quarterback with sort of a level head, I can't see him anything other than an injury stopping him from being RB1. I don't think the production is going to fall away. I do like JT at that pick at the 202, but as sort of mentioned, I on the turn here at 203 to 301. I'll go Justin Jefferson now that he's on the board, which I'm pretty happy to get at the 203, and then on the turn, I am going to go for running back Najee Harris at the Steelers. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, do you guys want to sort of discuss Jefferson and Harris, or?
I think we've just discussed Jefferson enough. I don't know whether you wanted to add anything, Rich. If not,
not
move on to Najee straight away.
Yeah.
So
yes.
So move on to Najee.
So with Najee, I just think it's pure volume. It's pure. I sort of, you were hesitant at the start because he wasn't really sort of receiving back when he came out of college, and everyone had a few questions, but he took the workload on his back and he sort of he pound and ground. And the reality to me is I think that's not going to change in Pittsburgh with the new quarterback. I think Tomlin does sort of he likes his heavy workload running backs as well. I think, look, there are a few other running backs for me to consider here, but I just feel Najee's a little bit safer. Maybe there's a little bit less on his legs. And I do like Mike Tomlin. I do think he's a well-organized coach. He gets the best out of the Steelers. He's got the best out of them for quite a long period of time now. So I'm pretty happy to get Najee at the start of the third at the 301.
Yeah, Rich. I mean, Najee was one of the guys that I referred to earlier of maybe being able to creep into the tier with Jonathan Taylor if they have another great season. Do you feel that same way?
I'll be honest, I'm concerned about the offensive line. I think the volume's great, and I think that offense, everybody's talking about potential step back at the quarterback position, but I don't know if anybody watched Ben Roethlisberger last year, but I think I'd be an upgrade over Big Ben last year. He was horrific. But yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about the offensive line. It was horrific last year, and they didn't really do much to help it. Yes, they signed a couple of pieces, but they're pretty average in terms of their replacements. So I am concerned about the offensive line. I think that Najee last year produced and performed well, but it was off the back of, as you pointed out, Nathan, that high volume. And if we see that volume start to slip, if we see the offense take a step back, that could really hurt him. So I like him. You know, he's still my RB3 in terms of Dynasty. It sounds like I'm hating on the guy. But yeah, I think there's some question marks certainly there. It comes back to it's Jonathan Taylor and then a bunch of question marks, isn't it? I think we talked about it probably 4 or 5 months ago, Liam, that running back 2, running back 3 are some of the hardest positions to cover on the thing.
Yeah, I agree that, as you said, we've spoken about it before. RB2, 3, and probably you're looking at 4, maybe even into RB5 range in Dynasty at the moment is kind of a wish-wash between whoever you kind of want at that tier. There's not a set chalk kind of list that there is for quarterbacks near enough. Nathan, just going to you quickly, do you feel that Najee is the solid running back 2 in Dynasty at the moment, or are you kind of on the same train as us, as that there's a bit of a discrepancy that you could kind of see any of the 3 or 4 guys in that range being able to be the RB2?
Yeah, I do think there is a chunk of 3-4 running backs here who could all put up their hand and say they are the RB2 in Dynasty. Obviously, we won't get into too many of them now because I'm sure they'll go off the board soon. But I do think they're about 3 or 4 that I would say could put their hand up. I just feel that Najee, I just have more faith in Mike Tomlin as opposed to some of the other coaches that some of those RBs are on, and I do feel that the volume that there's. I feel that they will be a predominantly run-first team, even though they've got such an exceptional wide receiving group. Well, when I say exceptional, I do need to sort of tone that down. They just have more depth at receiver than some other teams. But I think there are 1 or 2 others, but I'm pretty happy to stick with Najee. Yeah.
So I'm going to head over with my 302, and I'm going to take CD Lamb. Sorry, I'm not even sorry, Rich.
We're no longer
he's my wide receiver 3 in Dynasty, and even if that wasn't the case, I would have taken him anyway just to get your reaction. But honestly, CD Lamb for me, clear wide receiver 3. I've got AJ Brown just behind him, but yeah, he's going to be the number 1 guy in that offense now. Dak Prescott should be getting back to 100% fully trusting that ankle and becoming the guy that he should have been last year, that he kind of looked to be at the end of last season as well. He looked to get that confidence back. Now, we've heard enough from Rich about CD Lamb for the past 2 seasons plus. So, Nathan, how do you feel about CD Lamb? Because I know that some people think that wide receiver 3 in Dynasty is probably a little bit too high for him.
If I'm honest, I think wide receiver 3 is his ceiling, because I don't see him outperforming Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. So if you're willing to take CD Lamb and say, look, the best I'm going to get out of him is wide receiver 3 this year, next year, and the years coming up, then I think he does have a chance of achieving that. But on the same end, I think the sort of working in tandem with Amari Cooper last year, when they were sort of a fit pair, working as a 1 and a 2, helped him quite a bit, and he was still sort of growing, and there wasn't that much tape on him. I think this year, him being the clear number 1 receiver, which you could argue was last year already, but I think this year he's going to get a lot more double coverage. He's going to be really sort of pressured into performing for his points. And look, the Cowboys, they're going to have to throw it. I think the combination of Elliott and Pollard, I do like Tony Pollard, and I do like sort of the opportunity there and the RB sort of handcuff. But I do feel they're going to need to keep up with teams and passing the ball. So there could be volume there, but me personally, I'm buying sort of the wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 options in the Dallas team as opposed to CD. I think, as I said, I think wide receiver 3 is his ceiling as opposed to what you should expect, if that makes sense.
See, I think I'm more concerned, shall I say, about the secondary receiving options in Dallas. I think Dalton Schultz is a competent tight end. I think he'll have probably a good year. I think Michael Gallup's not fully fit. Are we going to see him at the beginning of the season? Is a question mark. I know there's a lot of hype around Jalen Tolbert at the moment, but to me, he's a deep threat. He's a speed option. I don't think he's going to be a volume play. I wouldn't be shocked. Now, this isn't a prediction, but I wouldn't be shocked if CeeDee Lamb led the league in targets this year. I think that the Dallas offense is going to run through CeeDee Lamb, and I think that he's good enough to command that volume and work with it. And I think there's potential that he could be incredible. incredible this year. But as Liam said, you've heard about me. I'll talk about CeeDee Lamb. So my pick. So this is the 303 and then the 401. So the 303, I'm going to take my running back 2, the player who I have ahead of Najee, and it's Dre Swift. I think that Detroit offense is underrated. I think that there's a lot of talk about Detroit being a bit of a joke franchise. And I think that actually what Dan Campbell's building, I think the guys are buying into it. And I think I'm starting to really like the weapons they're putting together. You know, they're going to have an elite offensive line. They've got bookend tackles. They've got a very good center. They've got an above-average tight end in Hawkinson. You've now got some complementary receivers. You've got your big prototypical X in DJ Chark. You've got your speed option in Jameson Williams. You've got your slot option in Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then you've got DeAndre Swift that, to me, is a completely movable weapon in that offense. And I think that the knock on DeAndre Swift at the moment is that he's in a bad offense. But I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case this season. I definitely don't think it's going to be the case a year or 2 years down the line, because they're probably going to get an elite quarterback in there in next off season, and suddenly everyone will be really excited about him again.
Yeah, I like that. I think it would have been a toss-up between DeAndre Swift and Najee if I had to pick a running back. But I felt like I needed to take a wide receiver with my last pick, so that's why I went Lamb. But really, Nathan, how do you feel about Swift? Because I've seen a lot of people on Twitter saying that he could be the next Alvin Kamara-like guy or something along those lines and really hyping him up. And then I've also seen the complete opposite side of people being completely out of Swift. Where do you fall on Swift at the moment?
Look, I am high on Swift. Swift, similar to Rich, or I wouldn't say similar to Rich, because Rich has him above Najee. I have him on par with Najee, maybe a fraction below Najee. But it's very much up there as your sort of Dynasty RB2, RB3 type range. I like Swift. The Kamara sort of comparisons, I like that. Obviously as a Saints fan, as a big Alvin Kamara fan, I can see that. But to me, in order for DeAndre Swift to evolve into that Kamara player, I think they need another running back then to carry the heavy legs. You need your Mark Ingram for the first year or two just to sort of plow the line while it opens up and frees up Kamara to really sort of find his legs. Look, DeAndre Swift can actually do both. The reality is he can do both sides of that. He can run through, he can hit your lines and your reads, as well as receive incredibly well. Yeah, I think DeAndre Swift's an incredibly good and safe pick there, and I do like him as a dynasty piece.
So, Rich, who is going to be your 401 at the moment?
So I'll be honest, this is the point at which in the draft where I don't particularly want to be drafting, because I've got like 4 guys that are all in a tier, and I know whichever one I pick, I'd be happy with any 4 of them, but I kind of have to pick one. So yeah, I'm going to go with Trevor Lawrence. I don't particularly like taking my QB2 whilst there's some good value and there's some good options on the board, but I think he's the player that I think has got probably the most upside of anyone left. I still think he is that elite talent that everybody was talking about this time last year. And I truly believe that, you know, it's almost the reverse of, by the time you've got rid of Urban Meyer, I think any head coach is basically going to see a massive uptick in terms of Trevor Lawrence. So I'm really excited about what he could be this year. So yeah, I'm happy to take him here as my QB2.
So do you consider him a little bit of a sneaky buy then? I mean, his price is probably around what? I don't have the ADP in front of me at the moment. The last time I took DLF ADP, he was running quarterback 11 off the board, and that was sometime in June. So do you consider him a sneaky buy at that point? Because that to me seems about right.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to sit here and say where he's ranked, because that's about where I've got him ranked. I think he's my QB 12, QB 11, something like that. In terms of trade value, I'd happily pay a 23 first and 23 second for him. I still think he's, you know, going to be an elite option. I'd certainly take him over any of the 2023 quarterbacks that we've not seen yet. So yeah, if people are getting nervous and looking to move off him, then yeah, he's absolutely a buy. But I don't think the Trevor Lawrence owner that probably spent the 101 on him a year ago is probably ready to cut bait quite yet.
Nathan, how do you feel about Lawrence? Do you think he's a little bit of a sneaky buy in terms of trade value?
Yes, definitely. I think he's another one that sort of inherited quite a high expectation role. Obviously, being the chosen one, the 101. From the NFL point of view, he obviously was expected to bring things back to Jacksonville, but they obviously had a lot of sort of issues there in the background. But when you're looking at fantasy value as well, I think he's definitely a buy. I think the wide receivers that they've recruited in the off season was a bit of sort of the curtain raiser. It was sort of right at the start when they signed Kirk to a decent or a big contract then for what everyone thought Kirk was worth, and then it sort of snowballed effect to the big sort of receiver Kansas City shuffle really. But you've got a situation now where I think a lot of people will be sleeping on Jacksonville again. Off the back of not necessarily upgrading too much. They're going more to the trenches as well. I think they're doing better each side of sort of scrimmage. So I think it's a long-term buy, but I don't see him being fantasy relevant this year. And even next year, I still, unless they're going to hopefully get a very very early draft pick again next year and then hit on maybe a stud receiver. Let's assume Travis Etienne comes back and is that first round quality player that we hoped he would be before the injury. I just can't see Trevor Lawrence's value this year, but I think he is a long-term buy, yes.
So for my 4th round pick, I'm going to take T. Higgins. Now, here is kind of the point of the draft where I'm tossing up all 3 positions, not tight end, obviously, but all 3 positions. So I decided to take T. Higgins because I just think he's the best available on the board right now. I think that quarterback-wise, I could wait a little bit and still pull out some sort of value there. But I feel if I take T. Higgins here, it stops Nathan a little bit. I suppose it's a little bit game theory. It stops Nathan taking T. Higgins and someone else and having a solid 3 wide receiver core. But Nathan, coming over to you, how do you feel about T. Higgins?
Yeah, look, I'm high on T. Higgins. Again, it's the great old debate of can a quarterback sustain 2 elite or wide receiver ones in a fantasy season? And Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Burrow as a combination are great to watch every Sunday, every Monday, every Thursday. But yeah, I think Higgins again is going to be the one missing out. Look, he's an awesome prospect and he's an awesome player, and I can't sort of praise the individual enough. But I think someone's going to be missing out in that offense, and it's not going to be Jamar Chase. And I think Joe Mixon, to me, is going to be a bit more relevant this year as well. I think teams are going to have learned and have seen how the Bengals played this year. They're going to obviously cover Jamar Chase, but they're going to prepare for the pass. And I think Joe Mixon is due for a better or possibly even a standout year for him. But look, I do like the player Higgins, but he's one I do have slight question marks over, really.
I think for me, I love both Chase and Higgins, but I think that people are forgetting just how good T. Higgins was down the stretch slightly. I think that there's the gap between T. Higgins and Jamar Chase is a lot closer than I think people want to admit. T. Higgins was the wide receiver 3 overall in week 12, wide receiver 4 overall in week 13, and was the overall wide receiver 1 in week 16. The guy was an absolute stud down the stretch. And I think that, don't get me wrong, Jamar Chase is incredible, but I think T. Higgins is also incredible. And I think that the gap is, I certainly have it closer than the rest of the kind of consensus Dynasty community perhaps have it.
Nathan, where are you going to go with your 403? And then you can take it straight into the 501 and we'll pick out if we want to jump in.
So So yeah, so I after that Trevor Lawrence scare with Rich taking his second quarterback, I think my hand's slightly forced here to make sure that I take someone of value. So I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts. I think in terms of who's left, look, there's some very talented rookie quarterbacks, but I just think Hurts has been there. He's done that. He look. There are question marks of let's hope he keeps the job for the full season, and let's hope he doesn't sort of fall away, but in the wayside. But I think with his legs, the upside with his legs, I think he is pretty safe there, and he sort of complements my team. T. Higgins, I would have loved to have been on the board here as well, but now that Higgins is gone, I'm going to zig a bit, and I'm going to go with Javonte Williams to double up at RB to pair with Najee Harris. Again, this to me is I'm hoping more for the upside here, where I'm fully aware there's still that Melvin Gordon shadow lurking in the background there to take possibly red zone rushes and sort of touchdown and volume away from him. But I think whether it's this year or next year, I think Javonte, along with DeAndre Swift and along with Najee, are in that sort of tier 2, just below JT. I think Williams and the way Denver will be, especially with Russell Wilson coming into town, it's going to be interesting to see how that offense is now run. They've obviously got one of the best sort of play action sort of quarterbacks on his feet, and defenses are going to have to set up to contain Russell Wilson, as well as how good he is outside of the pocket. So I think that's opportunity for Javonte to sort of get a bit more volume there as well. And I'm one of those old traditionalists. I quite like an RB build in most dynasties and most fantasy leagues. So I'm happy to get Najee and Javonte.
Rich, is there anything you want to pick up there? I think for me personally, in terms of this draft, that worked out perfectly because it made my decision on what quarterback I'm going to take after your turn, because Rich has got both quarterbacks, so he can't take another one. So a bit of game theory there helps me. And then running back, I was seeing whether you would take a running back or a wide receiver with your fourth or fifth pick if you weren't going to take a quarterback. So that's made my decision. But Rich, anything on those two before we move on?
No, not at all. I was a little bit surprised Nathan didn't double dip quarterback, because I think there's a big drop off after the next one for me. So I was a little bit surprised at that. I love the Jalen Hurts pick. I think that, look, if you could guarantee that Jalen Hurts was the quarterback in Philadelphia in 2023 and 2024, I genuinely think Jalen Hurts would be a top 6 quarterback for me in Dynasty. I think there's no doubt in the guy's fantasy production and what he's going to put on the field. The only question mark I have is he going to be the starting quarterback next year?
Yeah.
And that's it. Is, obviously the Eagles made that big trade with the Saints. They've got those 2 first-round picks next year, and that's my big concern, is that if he doesn't produce, they could quite easily be a mover in the trade market, whether it be trading up to get a rookie or trading to acquire the next Russell Wilson that becomes unhappy. That's my concern on Hurts.
The only thing I would say, I mean, I am concerned about that as well, but Hurts is in the best situation that he could possibly be in now that he's got AJ Brown there. Devonte Smith is going to be in his second year. I do think that they have somewhat improved that offensive line this year, and that Nick Sirianni as the head coach going into his second year is going to help that offense kind of breathe a bit, because it felt like they were relying on the run game, which wasn't brilliant a lot during the season. So I think that offense can take a step forward and has made the moves to take a step forward. So even though, yes, I've got those concerns that Rich has, I also think that offense can take a step forward. But he is one of the most polarizing, especially quarterback players at the moment in the Dynasty community. Rich, is there anything you wanted to add on Javonte before we move on? Because I am excited for my pick.
No, move on. Make your pick.
Yeah, so I was expecting, if T. Higgins was up, I was expecting Nathan to take T. Higgins and my next pick, which is going to be Michael Pittman. I've got them back to back in my rankings, even though they're a tier apart. So I've got Higgins at wide receiver 13, and then Pittman at 14. But as I said, they're a tier apart at the moment. To me, taking Pittman here is as a flex spot. I think it is one of the best flex spots I could have picked, looking at what's left on the board. So I won't dive too much into it. I think Ryan's an upgrade from Wentz. So with Alec Pierce coming in, whether he's actually going to do anything is something else. But I just think that gives the passing game an extra weapon, and their defense then has to think about it as well. And Paris Campbell might be back, surprisingly. We no one knows, but
keep believing.
But to me, that just brings out a bit of a I suppose, extra step for that offense to take, especially with the much better quarterback and all these reports about Ryan being accurate. Now, how do you feel about that then, Nathan? Because I've just seen Rich's picks, and I know that it could be a bit controversial in terms of who is still left on the board, especially knowing that someone is probably screaming at their phone in their car or however they're listening to this, saying that I forgot someone when I know that I haven't.
No, I think I'm a big fan of Michael Pittman. I was tossing and sort of trying to work out where I should go and whether I should go receiver. But yeah, as I sort of said earlier, I'm sort of a traditional star hard with running backs, and obviously sometimes it doesn't work out with the injuries. But yeah, look, you obviously move forward now, and I've got Pitts as my second wide receiver anyway.
So, Rich, you feel free to go on Pittman. If you don't want to, you can go through straight to your picks.
No, I love Pittman. He's someone that I've done a full 180 on this offseason. I didn't particularly love him coming out. I didn't particularly love him after his rookie season. But going back and watching the tape this last year, I think I've perhaps underrated him. I think he's now up as my wide receiver 10 in terms of my dynasty ranks.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm very much all in on Pittman. However, you definitely did take him over the wrong person. And it's another guy that I've done a full 180 on, and that's Jalen Waddle. I think that look, Tyreek Hill coming into that offense, it could take away from Jalen Waddle, but I just think that a guy that's as electric as he is with the ball in his hands is going to find volume. So yeah, he's not the top 5 wide receiver that perhaps he was before the Tyreek Hill trade, but I still think he's an elite option. So yeah, for me to get him here as my wide receiver 2, I'm pretty happy. And then I'm going to try and kind of outthink you here, Liam. So obviously Nathan took Kyle Pitts 101. To me, there's only one other tight end that is perhaps rosterable that I'd be happy with out of these guys. So I'm going to grab that guy here. I'm going to take Pat Freiermuth as my 601, the second tight end off the board.
I like that move from a game theory point of view. Although you are predictable because I knew you were going to do it. So I 100% just completely took him off my board because I knew that I wasn't going to get Freiermuth where I would have wanted him, which would have been with my 7th round pick rather than my 6th. But yeah, I think with Waddle, I think those 3, the Higgins, Pittman, and Waddle are all very similar in terms of dynasty community right now. I'm lower on Waddle than the other 2 just because I'm not certain what the offense is going to look like with Hill. I think Hill is going to come in, and there is no way that they've just traded as well as paid him a lot of money for Waddle to still be essentially a target leader. I think that Hill is going to come in and do kind of what Waddle did. I'm not saying Waddle is just going to fade into obscurity, because I really do think Waddle's going to be a good player. I just don't know whether I'm comfortable taking him above Pittman, who is going to see all those targets. Nathan, where do you fall on the Waddle Pittman scenario at the moment?
Look, I want to love Waddle. There's something about him that I just love for the sport, for the game. I think he's entertaining, but I share a very similar opinion to you, Liam. I think there are those question marks around the Dolphins sort of offense. They wouldn't have obviously, or you still trade to become a better team, so it's understandable why they went for Tyreek Hill. Look, they ended up they tagged Gesicki as well. So to me, Gesicki is also more of a receiving option for them. Chase Edmonds is very good on a receiving basis as well. You've got Taran Armstead, who came up to at least give a bit more sort of protection there to Tua on his more open side, on obviously the left tackle, assuming they're going to play him in that role like they did in the Saints. Again, it's question marks over whether Tua can sustain all of this. I haven't seen enough from Tua to think that he can make Waddle a top 12 wide receiver this year. I think there's enough in him as a player, but it's a very different situation from your sort of T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, or even maybe your Devonte Smith and AJ Brown. I think that's going to be quite an interesting thing, because I think Waddle and Devonte Smith should be on more of a similar tier, where you've got your elite wide receiver ones and question marks over your quarterbacks. And I think that battle will be more interesting. Whereas, as you say, if we're going back to the original question with Pittman, I think Pittman's going to be the main target there in Indy for Matt Ryan. So I've got Pittman ahead of Waddle, and I do have a few question marks over him, but he's also for the game.
So do you have anything set on Frymouth before I make my 6th round pick?
No, not really. I think I'm a big fan of Paddy. I think he's a good player. I think the option's there. So I think that was a good pick. But as you say, it's more mind games, isn't it?
Yeah, so playing the mind games a little bit more, I'm going to go quarterback here, because I notice you don't have a super flex choice at the moment. And as Rich said, he sees a teardrop, and so do I. So I'm taking Trey Lance here. Now, I was a big anti-Lance guy last year, not in terms of talent, but in terms of where he was going and in terms of whether he was actually going to play last year. This year, you're hearing reports coming out of camp about arm fatigue and this, that, the other. Jimmy G, he still hasn't been traded even. So I'm kind of waiting for that Jimmy G trade to go through before I go full in on Lance. But I think out of the quarterbacks left on the board, Lance is clear above the others at the moment. Nathan, how do you feel about that Lance pick, and did I snipe you?
If I'm honest, you didn't snipe me. If I'm brutally honest, look, I'll come back to, because you've sort of made it so now I can at least leave quarterback right until the end. So I can now at least try get 2 picks in here, and we'll get to quarterback in a bit. I like Trey Lance, but again, it's another sort of. I'm sure in a month's time, when we're 2 weeks away from the start of the season, we'll have a lot more answers to these questions. But right now with Jimmy G. This is a guy, again, there were already concerns about Trey Lance before he even was drafted. And even since he's been drafted, great, he's had a year of sitting behind, learning and being coached up. But this guy hasn't played much competitive football, let alone had time to sort of acclimatize to now an NFL role. So I think the talent is there. Everyone can see that he has the potential. But I think it's a lot to ask of Trey Lance. It feels like the sort of fantasy community is expecting sort of a breakout second year like Patrick Mahomes or someone. But the reality is, if you look at Lance at college, he was explosive, but there's not much data. There's not much sort of tangible that to convince me that I think he's going to be a hit straight away.
Rich, do you want to take anything on that, or should we move on?
No, I think, look, the potential of Lance is, it's basically what we said about Jalen Hurts, isn't it? It's QB1 overall is the potential. So, yeah, if he puts it together, there are plenty of question marks, but if he puts it all together, it's incredible. It's a hell of a risk because, as you said, he's not played Division 1 college. He's not played a game in a long time, but it's tantalising potential, isn't it?
So, Nathan, where are you going with this turn? I know you said that you're not going to take a quarterback because of a bit of game theory there. There's no need. No one else needs a quarterback, so you can wait.
So
you currently need a wide receiver and a flex. So where are you going?
Yeah. So wide receiver I think it is getting into slightly murky waters here, where there are quite a lot of talented players, and I obviously I don't want to say too much because you two guys are sort of battling out as well for a few players. But the reality,
I personally don't need wide receiver, so
okay,
it's only Rich that you need to hide your thoughts from.
Or the thing is, I've got as I said earlier, there are quite a few that I sort of all packaged together. I'm going to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown as my sort of wide receiver too. I'm saying this and I don't feel massively convinced by that. I feel like I have missed a little bit at wide receiver, or at least jeopardized the rest of the build of my draft today. So I'm taking a few dart throws here. Then in terms of my flex position, again, I don't know whether to stay true to myself and go running back here as my flex, or to go into that sort of murky undertone of wide receivers. There are a lot of good receivers there that I do like the upside. Mooney, Devonte Smith, Rashad Bateman, Rondell Moore. I like all those guys in terms of their upside, but I think they're as murky as some of the running backs. I'm sitting here and I'm tossing up between a Cam Akers coming back from an injury and a Rams offense, or I'm tossing up between sort of a J.K. Dobbins coming back from injury in a run-heavy Ravens team. I'm going to go with Cam Akers at running back as my flex. I think the Rams are just going to be a great offense. Look, they lost Robert Woods with injury and transition, but I think Cam Akers, let's hope he keeps his body in one piece. But I think he's going to, even though there's still your Darrell Hendersons who did well, and your other pieces there, I think they drafted a rookie running back as well, Kyron Williams, I think.
Yes.
But I think you're in a situation now where I like Akers. I've got him in a few leagues, so I'm going to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Cam Akers as my flex.
So Akers for me whittles down the three options that I have for my next pick, because I need to take a running back. But I want to come to Amon-Ra St. Brown because I'm quite surprised you took him over guys like Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, Devonte Smith, Rashad Bateman, who I have all over him. I mean, I'm not high on Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're probably not going to like my rankings at the moment because I've got him as wide receiver 39. But I'm just not a fan of Amon-Ra St. Brown, unfortunately. Where do you want to go with this? Because I have three of those players that I just mentioned in my top 24 wide receivers in Dynasty. Is there anyone that you would have taken over, or do you like the Amon-Ra St. Brown pick?
I don't want to give too much away because I've still got two picks that are both going to be wide receivers.
I can't take a wide receiver, and nor can Nathan.
Oh, okay. So. All right. Perfect. That's fine then. So I don't want to. I feel like I'm driving.
You need a running back as well, not two wide receivers.
No, I don't need a running back. I thought
that's what you got down on the show sheet.
Oh, I've messed up here. All right,
go on. Carry on. I'll sort it.
I feel like I'm reversing the car after Nathan after you've just driven over him. But I mean, I've got like 7 receivers that I've got ranked over Amon-Ra St. Brown still on the board. So I'd have Devonta Smith, Elijah Moore, Brandon Ayuk, Rashad Bateman, Darnell Mooney, Jerry Jeudy, Chase Claypool, all over Amon-Ra St. Brown. So yeah, I guess that says everything I'd want to say about Amon-Ra St. Brown.
What about Akers? Is there anything?
To give myself a little bit of defense here, I think with a lot of the way that I ended up going with the draft in terms of running back heavy, I sort of I felt I needed a desperation sort of boom player. And I feel that all those wide receivers that you have mentioned are, in my opinion, on the depth chart in their team, they're all not the number one. And that's not saying for a fact that Amon-Ra St. Brown is the number one in Detroit. And the reality is there are quite a lot more mouths to feed this season. But I do feel that Amon-Ra St. Brown could has the opportunity to at least break into that wide receiver 1 role. Jerry Jeudy is another one where I think it's going to be an interesting competition between him and Cortland Sutton for that sort of wide receiver 1 role there in Denver. But they've got 2 awesome running backs in Javonte and Melvin Gordon. So it's going to be a hybrid sort of situation there. So that is my little brief defense of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he can be the wide receiver 1 on Detroit, let alone on fantasy. We'll cross that bridge later.
I'm sure we'll need to get you back on to have a proper defense of Amon-Ra St. Brown, but we just don't have time, unfortunately.
No, exactly.
Rich, is there anything you want to say on Cam Akers before I move on to my running back pick?
No, obviously we talked about him a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? So I think, look, if what we saw in the playoffs was the real Cam Akers, I think it's probably not gonna help Nathan's team. But if that was because he came back too early and it was against some fantastic defenses, and this is a guy that was a top 3-4 dynasty running back before that Achilles injury. So if he can get back to that price, then 19th player off the board, I think Nathan could be sitting pretty.
So again, playing a bit of game theory, Rich does need a running back, so I'm going to take one here and leave tight end till last and stay on brand for myself here. I'm going to take J.K. Dobbins now, looking at June ADP, because I haven't been organised enough to get July's ADP out of DLF at the moment. So I struggle with J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, and the guy that I kind of assume you're going to take, Rich, and feel free to surprise me when it comes to your pick, which is Travis Etienne, in my opinion. Those 3 are all kind of in very similar situations. All 3 missed a lot of the season last year, if not all of it. They're coming back from significant injuries, and they're coming back into roles where they are, again, in my opinion, the clear running back 1. The reason I took Dobbins over Etienne here is because Doug Peterson is now the head coach for the Jags, and we've seen what Doug Peterson likes to do with his running back rooms. He likes running back by committee, and I kind of worry, especially with the amount of volume that James Robinson has had in the past seasons, that's kind of given him a bit of a edge to try and get more touches, where we'd kind of expect Travis Etienne to have that lead role and the sole role. And then just to defend J.K. Dobbins a bit, I think that in that running offense, we've seen that Dobbins has been the very efficient guy. And to me, if I'm picking in this range, I don't want any of these running backs if I have to, unless I have to, because they're all kind of risky plays and I don't really know which one to go with. Rich, is there anything you want to add on Dobbins before you go and pick Etienne or surprise me?
No, not at all. I think that we've seen the injury talk this week. I know he bit back at was it Rap Sheet or Schefter?
Yeah,
I can't remember which one.
It was Rap Sheet, yeah.
Yeah, so
he beat back a Rap Sheet, but I don't think Rap Sheet actually reported the original thing, was it? And that's not important anyway.
Yeah, but look, I think that Dobbins is the potential's there. I think we talked about Akers, Dobbins, Etienne. All 3 of them have got ceiling of top 5 dynasty running back and floor of out the league in 2 years. So I think that they're very much boom bust plays. It annoys me, Liam, that you've basically talked through every single one of my picks and known exactly who I'm picking. But yes, I am going to pick Travis Etienne. I think that, look, for me, this time a year ago, Etienne was very close to Najee Harris in terms of how I had them ranked. And as we said, Najee Harris is now the running back 3 in Dynasty. And I wouldn't be shocked if Travis Etienne is, that movable piece. We talked about it with Dre Swift, someone that can line up all over the field. And I think he could be absolutely incredible. I disagree with Liam about the Doug Peterson usage. I think that probably gets a little bit overblown. I think that, look, if he's the best player on that offense, which outside of Trevor Lawrence, I think he's going to be the best player on that offense. I think they're going to want to give him the ball as much as possible.
So, Rich, I'm just going to say we play in too many leagues and we talk way too often. That's probably why I know. I will say that you surprised me with the Trevor Lawrence pick. I did think we were going to wait a little bit longer on quarterbacks, but have you got anything to add on that, Nathan, before Rich goes and talks about his final pick?
No, nothing. I think Travis Etienne, along with Trevor Lawrence. I think you're stacking very well here, Rich. I think Tom would be proud, but I think those bye weeks might be a bit dangerous. So you'll have to cover them later.
Well, yeah. Well, there you go. I'm going to steal your stack from you, Nathan. I'm going to grab the highest ranked wide receiver on my board, which is Devon Smith. Feels slightly painful, I'll be honest, that we've picked 24 players from the 2020 and 2021 draft classes, and Elijah Moore's not been picked. That was quite painful for me. But I've got to be honest, I've got Devon Smith one spot ahead of Elijah Moore, so I'll take Devon Smith here, who I think people are writing off because of the AJ Brown acquisition. But to me, I think that's a good thing. I think that, Devon Smith's still going to see enough volume to eat, and I think that if he can now play that Z receiver role, he's going to get to line up, off the line of scrimmage an awful lot more, and it's going to free up his release, which is the biggest kind of concern in his game. And I think that Devon Smith could really thrive as that wide receiver 2 in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I share the opinion. Yeah, he was one that I thought of. He was the one that I was sort of working out with some Brown, and I might have a few sleepless nights watching the season. But no, I think as long as Smith performs, then Jalen Hurts, my quarterback, will do well. So happy with that.
So I'm going to dive in here with my last pick, and surprise, surprise, it is tight end. I'm going to take Cole Kmet. So Albert O was still on the board, Brevin Jordan was still on the board, but to me, Kmet's the highest ranked tight end that I've got. I got him at 13 at the moment, and I think that he's the one most poised towards a breakout. I mean, Fields hasn't got much help in terms of that offense. I think he's going to get the targets, and he's shown that he can be good when he gets those targets. There's no one else really in that offense, and unfortunately, I say unfortunately, I'm a Packers fan, and I'm talking about the Bears being terrible. So I don't think that offense is going to be brilliant, but out of the options available, I've got Kmet over the other two that are still on the board. Rich, anything to add there? Nathan, anything to add? Or do you want to just move on to Nathan's very last pick and the last pick of the draft?
No, let's just do everyone a favour and move on.
Yeah, I think, sure. Well, I have to, or I could actually go for a position piece, but I'd be taking an even riskier role if I left some of these quarterbacks on the board. Look, the options left to me are, to me, it's a toss-up with I think Tua can break out with Waddle, with these pieces, with Tyreek Hill now, with a better offensive line, Chase Edmonds, or do I think the breakout's going to be had more with the sophomore quarterbacks like your Zach Wilsons or your Justin Fieldses, or maybe even your Mac Jones with Devontae Parker now? Who knows? But I'm gonna stick with the second-year quarterbacks, bank on the little bit more sort of experience. I'm going to pick Tua. And I think Tyreek Hill's going to carry him quite a bit, hopefully. I think there's going to be a lot of yards after catch type sort of fantasy production. And I hope that is enough to sort of keep him in the role. I like having your southpaw left arm quarterbacks or left-handed in the league. But I think, I'm going to stick with Tua, and that's more because, if I'm honest, I have Wilson slightly over Fields, and it was a bit of a toss-up of whether I go with Wilson with also some of the pieces that they've acquired. As Rich said earlier, I like Elijah Moore as well, and I think Garrett Wilson will add to that depth. And in a sort of a second-year rebuild with a new coach. But I think, Tua is who I'm going to go with there as my super flex.
So, Rich, I've got these guys very similarly ranked. I've got Fields at 15, Tua at 16, and Zach Wilson at 17. So to me, it's really a toss-up between any of them. We've heard you speak about Fields before, and the fact that you don't think that the Bears are setting him up for success. So out of Wilson and Tua, which one are you going with, basically, is the question.
So I've basically got the 4 quarterbacks in terms of Wilson, Fields, Jones, and Tua back-to-back in my rankings. I've got them in that order. So I've got Zach Wilson first in a tier slightly ahead. Well, maybe. And then I've got Fields, Matt Jones, and Tua is actually the 4th out of those 4. So again, not wanting to drive over Nathan with my thoughts again. But yeah, did you want to give us a rundown of the rosters? And then we'll get this tweeted out, and we'll let Twitter decide, Nathan.
Yeah, so I'll start off with my team. I've got Herbert as my quarterback, JT, so Jonathan Taylor, and J.K. Dobbins as my running backs. I've got 3 wide receivers. That would be Lamb, Higgins, and then Pittman in the flex. Komet as my tight end, and then Trey Lance as my super flex. Rich, do you want to take your team away, or am I just going straight through?
You go through them all, and then we'll go to Nathan for our dynasty tip.
I'm sure the listeners are bored of hearing my voice, but Rich's team, you've got Joe Burrow, DeAndre Swift, Travis Etienne, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Pat Freiermuth, and then Devonte Smith and Trevor Lawrence. And then Nathan's team is Jalen Hurts, Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Kyle Pitts, Cam Akers, and Tua Tagovailoa. So they will be out on the @5yard Dynasty account later today if you're listening live. So that is Tuesday. I'll tweet them out before I go to bed, and then they'll be around for Wednesday, and we'll keep the poll up for a good few days so those podcast listeners can try and get in.
Gives you an opportunity to buy some votes, Liam.
Oh yeah, definitely. My team's the best anyway, so I'm not worrying.
I need to get mine sent out to all the Lions Ultras there in Detroit, and hopefully it goes viral.
But Nathan, it's been brilliant having you on. At the end of every episode this offseason, we've been trying to get dynasty tips. So give us your dynasty tip for the listeners.
Look, I'm obviously this is a biased opinion, which doesn't help the tip, but I think I would be wary of Michael Thomas, and I think Chris Olave will be the wide receiver 1 in the New Orleans, and I think that he will be a top, let's say a top 16 wide receiver in the year.
I entirely endorse this take.
Are you trying to buy Rich's votes in the poll?
No, I might be. I don't know. I just think there's something that look. I love Michael Thomas and having watched him for the last 5 years, but I think he really. I can't see him coming back at that elite level without Jameson. I think Chris Olave is going to be given a chance to run riot, hopefully.
So, guys, Nathan's trying to buy Rich's vote. Rich, I'm just going to remind you that I've got CD Lamb, so that should be enough to get your vote.
I love that you guys think that I'm going to vote for anyone else other than my team.
I'm just trying to convince you. I know it's not going to happen. You're way too competitive to give someone else the vote. But, listeners, that's everything from this week's show. So from me, from Nathan, from Rich, until next time, we'll see you later. See you later, guys.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.